The birth of my third child was by emergency C-section. The overtone during the birth surgery was one of hushed, quiet voices, very little shared or explained. A general feeling of unease throughout. Once the birth surgery was over, I was reunited with my little one in the maternity ward. I was in a lot of pain, as was to be expected, and had what I thought to be an unusual amount of discomfort. I had had 2 previous C-sections, and I knew that this felt different. I was assured all was well, and that the healing was on track. I was allowed to go home 2 days later. I thought that if I got home, I would begin to feel better again. But what followed was 10 days of subdued, quiet awareness. Like I wasn't quite myself, but could not pinpoint what was wrong. 2 more visits to the midwife proved everything to be fine, even though my baby was losing weight and I had no milk. But none of these rang alarm bells for me or the medical staff, and my assertions of general unease were put down to my recent surgery. It was noted, however, that I had an extreme amount of bruising around the incision. The midwife made my doctor aware of this and was told to keep an eye on it, and if I was concerned, then I should book an appointment. The 10 days blurred by. I was aware that my baby was incredibly patient and quiet, rarely cried, and slept most of the time. It didn't occur to me that I had no milk until perhaps the 7th day. Uncharacteristically, he began to wail, and it all began to make sense. That night we gave him milk from the fridge, as it was all we had, and he was soothed. I had begun to bleed by this stage. Bright red drops. Light at first, nothing too alarming. I thought it odd, but my thoughts were not clear. Over the next 3 days, the bleeding became heavier until on the 10th day, I could not keep up with the pad change. I called the doctor, still unconcerned. I made my appointment and sat down to feed my baby. Not long after I sat down, I felt an overwhelming sense of something, a fullness perhaps, an eruption just about to begin. At that exact moment, my husband walked in the door, home early to grab a bite to eat. I gave him the baby with an urgency that overcame me. I just knew I needed to get up. And then the flood began. The blood streamed down my legs, warm and heavy. The flow was torrential. At some point, my husband had put the baby down and was now holding me. I was leaning against him, crying and crying out. What is happening? I simply did not understand what I was seeing and feeling. I squeezed my legs tight together in an effort to stop the flow, to no avail. And then suddenly I understood the absurdity of trying to control this. I realized there was nothing I could do that could change this, and I had to simply go with it. I had the intense sensation that my whole life was bleeding away, and I was overcome with a sense of peace. Time and space slowed right down. I could see decisions and the choices being made. I took a long, deep breath and saw the universe shifting and expanding. I knew then that I could make a choice to be terrified and panic, or I could make a choice to surrender. Let go of my life. And I saw that there was, in fact, no choice. There was only one. Let go. And it felt like a complete letting go of my life. My husband put me in the shower while he raced around getting things organized. In his panic, he forgot to turn on the hot water. I had a ridiculous thought that I was going to bleed to death in a freezing shower, and I began to laugh. But then, as I saw the blood in its constant stream, I slowly cried. Big, heavy tears. Watching my life slip away has a very calming and grounding effect on me. And by this stage, nothing was stopping the blood. I shoved a towel between my legs to catch the flow. I noticed that there was blood all over the floor, everywhere, and I felt that panic again. And then I breathed. That slowness, that higher part of myself stepped in. She knew exactly what to do and slowed everything down. And everything stayed incredibly slow. My husband was talking too fast, moving too fast, driving too fast. More than once I asked him to slow down in a very calmed, measured voice. He looked at me like I was crazy. Arriving at the hospital was intense. Everyone around me was in emergency mode. I couldn't reconcile it with how I was feeling. Calm, still, quiet. I wanted to sleep. I was later transferred to a larger hospital and thought it a bit of an overreaction with the lights, sirens, and speed of the ambulance. The nurse and medic beside me continued to move with speed. Once at the hospital, I was prepped for surgery with cannula after cannula going into my arms and hands. Each new doctor asked what, when, how, and I think I explained it to them, but I have little memory of this time. I felt I was talking too slowly and quietly for them to understand. I had several hours where I lost consciousness here. When I awoke, it was to find they were flying me to a city hospital. I think this is the first time reality stepped in. I suddenly understood where I was and what was happening, and I began to cry again. The plane waited several more hours as I needed to be stable enough to make the flight. Eventually, late at night, I was wrapped in blankets waiting on the gurney in an open hangar to board the flying doctor's plane. I was conscious again, and I could see the stars all around me. And suddenly, the distance between those stars and me was reduced to nothing. I was aware that I was the stars, the universe, and consciousness. I found my presence here. Under these stars, I saw everything as a whole and connected, and it was overwhelming and normal all at once. I felt such immense joy. I was part of this. On the journey to the city, I felt completely supported and surrounded by what one could only call angelic beings. Some were so close I felt I could touch them. I really wanted to be with them, but the doctor kept gently shaking me awake. I smiled up at him each time. It was so peaceful in that semi-conscious state. Everything had a beautiful golden glow. Just before surgery, I was waiting in a small room beside the operating theater. The anesthetist was beside me. She said she would check if they were ready for me and left me alone. In those moments, I started to cry again. Big, slow tears rolling down my face as I lay there. I was just so tired. So incredibly tired. Soul weary. I realized I didn't want to be kept awake anymore. I just wanted to sleep. And in sleeping, I knew I would be giving up my life. And I decided that it was the easiest decision I had ever made. I felt my body and mind begin to let go. Then I saw a hand beside me, and a firm and cheery voice said to me, "Are you coming with us then? Or staying here?" And I knew what this meant. I knew I was leaving my body. I was shown briefly an apocalyptic scene and was given the understanding that this had been my life. A life lived in fear. Then I reached out for that hand and had a split second of thinking about my family. I knew immediately that they would be okay. They had their own life. And then freedom, immense and full, understanding and knowing. I was pulled out of my body very fast. And then the music began. And fireworks. A celebration on every level. Choirs of angels and jubilation. I felt free. I was weightless. A beam of light, flying, soaring through the bright sky. The light was immense and went in every direction. Blue, bright sky everywhere. I had those first few moments of reveling in that glory of freedom. And then I knew exactly where I needed to be. I moved off in a specific direction, soaring extremely fast through that space. The enormity and interconnectedness of everything was an all-consuming feeling. I was one with God consciousness. I was still aware of myself as me, but the super-expanded version, the version that knew all and saw all. I saw a structure hanging in the sky in the distance. This was where I was headed. It was circular in shape. I saw 3 overlight beams also heading that way. I felt utter elation. I knew who they were, and I was excited to meet them again. I arrived at what was a vast library. Greeting the others was like greeting friends and family, although none were from my previous life. These were more ancient than that, cycling throughout time together. Some had not been incarnate for thousands of years. I was home with them, and we were so happy to see one another. We talked and reminisced. We shared stories of my life. We discussed contracts and purpose. How did I feel about my life? And then I was handed a book. I flicked through, and it looked empty. Every page was blank. And then I opened to a page with words, And when I saw those two words, I knew I was coming back to my life. I was going back. I was supported in this decision, asked again and again if that was what I wanted. I just knew if I didn't, I would be coming back again to do this life thing. Another birth, another life, another journey. And I knew that I may not get it again. Self-worth had been my nemesis many whole lifetimes, thousands of them, a vast string flashing by me. And I knew it. This was the one thing left to master. Once I had made the decision, I moved out of the library space. I spent a moment with my family. Knowing that I would see them again, I made my way out to the vastness, and I began to feel myself moving down levels. The light was gradually less bright, and I started to take on my physical form once again. My physical form began to manifest out of the atoms all around me, vast groups of them joining together and layering over my body. I could feel them take their place all around my energetic body. They covered me and energized me. It was like putting on a beautiful cloak and having it settle a warmth all over me. It was an incredible feeling that I can still feel today. I touched down onto a road. It was wide and long. Long grass and flowers waving gently in the breeze on either side. I started to walk, and as I walked, a house started to come into view. As I got closer, I could hear voices, laughter, talking. Then I could see groups of people in a cottage garden. I walked in through the front gate and headed for the front door. I didn't feel like I knew any of these faces. I stepped inside the house to subdued light, like a soft orange and golden glow. I noticed that the room was full of small children, toddlers, and infants. Outside it was all adults. These children were holding one another. There was support from elderly helpers, like grandparents. Some children were walking or being carried up some stairs over to one side. I joined them on the stairs and found I had my hands being held by some small children. I could see at the top of the stairs an old couple hugging and whispering to the children and babies. When I got to the top, they hugged me and whispered words of love into my ears. The children were then taken to various doors to go through. I stood watching for a while, uncertain that I wanted to be here. The grandmother motioned to me. "Are you ready?" she asked. I shook my head. She asked me 2 more times before she said, "Come and help us." So I took my place at the top of the stairs and whispered words of love into each child's ear. After a while, she looked at me, a questioning look. I nodded and got up. I walked through a door, and inside was a mirror on the wall. The room was soft and glowing and dim. I walked up to the mirror and looked into my eyes. "Are you ready?" I asked. I wasn't sure I was, but I did it anyway. Vroom. Sucked back into my body again. Waking up after surgery, my very first statement was, "I am here." I had been intubated, so my croaky voice did not carry very far. The midwife in my room said, "Oh, you're awake," and gave me some ice to suck. I was back, in my body, in my life, ready with my purpose. I lost 4 liters of blood. I was transfused with 6 pints of blood and 15 pints of plasma. I had my uterine arteries cauterized and never was able to bring my milk supply back for my little one. I spent many weeks recovering in hospital and then had home care after. It has taken me 6 years and counting to rewrite my life. In many ways, I have been reborn. I lost many memories, had a very dark night of the soul where I developed anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Longed for that connection again and had many long nights contemplating how I could get back. After the initial euphoria, I lost all reality and ceased to function on a normal level. But slowly, I began to access that peace and grace in waking life. I began to see the slowness and the vastness and the choice. I began to love myself. I was grounded, slow, and thoughtful. My speech, my breath, the way I move, everything slowed down. Everything in my life changed. Now, I am helping others access that innate peace inside them. Through reality, acceptance, surrender, and self-love, connecting them to their past, their lineage, and that knowing that we are not alone in this vastness, always connected, part of the whole, part of the one consciousness. It all matters, yet nothing matters. I had a second out-of-body experience on my way home from the hospital. I lived 500 kilometers from the city hospital, and my mom offered to drive me and my baby home, as I was not allowed to drive. We got about 60 kilometers from my hometown, and I had an overwhelming urge to swap with my mom and drive. She resisted this, but I insisted. Further up the road, a car pulled out in front of us. We were traveling at 110 kilometers per hour when this happened. I had no time to brake, but only respond. In that split second, I swerved around the car on the outside, onto the roadside. There just happened to be a small slipway there. I left my body and looked down at the car and my baby in the back. I saw his car seat swerve violently. I heard clearly, "Are you sure?" I have no doubt that my mother could not have reacted quickly enough, and had I not insisted I drive, it may have been a different outcome for us all. I am so incredibly grateful for my life, although to this day my mom can't speak about that drive.